Our last piece quite perfectly captures that sentiment. It's from the program Ideas in 1979 and features a skeptical Max Allen with Ted Nelson, author of The Home Computer Revolution. He was also the head of a software company called Computopia. Nelson tried to explain to Allen why someone might want a computer in their home.
The computer screen is essentially a very important transition for civilization. We've been reading from and writing on paper now for perhaps 700 or 800 years. Before that, parchment, and before that, scrolls. And while the paper book was far more accessible than the parchment scroll, nevertheless, the instantaneous computer screen image will be far more accessible still, because it can zip across the communication line with virtually instantaneous accessibility. Not only that, but it presents whole new vistas to the imagination. Suppose you want to learn something, okay? Now this is perhaps an unusual situation these days. Most people who want to learn something take a course. But suppose you want to learn something and you walk to an appropriate section of the library, one which at least is labeled with the name of what you think you want to learn, let's say something about astronomy. And you pull down a book from the shelf. Now, the book says what it thinks it is. Every author, as a rule, gives a book the title he thinks it ought to have. But the book does not tell you what other people think of it. It does not tell you where it lives in the history of thought on astronomy. As a reader of a book, you open it and you have to try to figure out for yourself where you are in the realm of ideas, where these ideas came from, what their influence has been. But understanding where they are, what context they come from, and what they mean, being able to explore them. I wish kids could fly a rocket ship on the screen to any star within immediate view, and the computer screen will let you do that.
So will your imagination.
Most kids don't have developed enough imagination, partly because their families don't work on developing it. Okay, we can at least give them explorational tools for the universe of ideas, and that's what I want to see happen. I want to get away from the bang-bang sort of thing.
Well, most of what you know that you think is important now, and certainly most of what I know that I think is important, I didn't get from university courses. You didn't either, did you?
Certainly not.
And we certainly didn't get them through any sort of computer-assisted process.
Wait, because, see, computer-assisted is such a vague word.
Okay, a process involving a computer, in any way at all.
We got them from book-assisted processes. We got them from magazine-assisted.
And from talking to other people, and also going out and looking ourselves at things we were interested in.
A very important thing, and if there were one thing that education should teach above all else, it's how to see what's in front of you.
I don't understand what the necessity of an electronic device called a computer, or anything else like that, a computer screen, to use your word, is in making people smarter. I don't think that another gadget is going to have any effect at all.
The computer is just a general device for dealing with symbols and following plans. And because of the unfortunate history of the last decade or so, in which a priesthood has grown up to limit access to the computer, a certain image of what the computer is and how it operates has come into being. As far as I'm concerned, the computer is just really a magic piece of paper. And in effect, it's the generalized form of writing, generalized form of paper. And I don't know what connotations you're reading into the phrase "the computer," but all I'm saying is that our writings of tomorrow, you can today read from a computer screen, and any book that's stored on your local computer, you can read from it. But that's not where it gathers momentum. Where it gathers momentum is from building a larger library that contains anything you might want to read and gets it to you quickly, and permits not just getting, let's say, The Pardoner's Tale or Far from the Madding Crowd, because obviously any of these can be better accessed in paper, but from being able to flip through the latest stuff and marginal notes on it. And the latest stuff is awfully hard to get. You can get this month's stuff from the rack of magazines which is up front in the library. You can't get last month's stuff or the stuff from 6 months before, because a lot of the good stuff cannot be gotten by any means whatever.
I think you're swimming against a very strong tide here. Your vision of this machine as a reading and writing tool is not the vision of this machine that IBM has, or anybody else that I can think of. I mean, we can go out and get 150 people in this field in here, and not one of them will say to you what a computer is an elegant reading and writing machine.
That's right.
That's why it's called a computer. It is used, after all, for computation of one sort or another, that is, pushing the kinds of data that you and I will not find in Far from the Madding Crowd around.
This is not quite so. The computer is a projective device. That is, anyone will see. It's a Rorschach test. Anyone will see in it that which is of the most concern to him. And it happened that it's an absolutely basic invention that could have developed from, say, the flashing light controller used on motion picture marquees. It happens that it developed out of calculating machines, and that's only for historical reasons. That during the war they had to calculate the trajectories of large bullets.
What do you mean it could have developed from something else, like the flashing lights on a marquee?
Okay, the flashing lights on these lovely old movie theaters they had in the 1930s, you had thousands of flashing light bulbs that would go on and off. And they had controlling boxes, which would essentially send out the electrical impulses that would turn these lights on and off. And what I'm saying is that if there had been a lot of money and effort expended on these control boxes, the device that they would have come up with would have been identical in structure with today's small computer. The point is that it is a completely general object and has no commitment to numerical uses. That the numerical use of the computer is as arbitrary as the entertainment use of the computer. It is a totally general object, suitable for use for communication devices, for music for music performance, for making pictures, for controlling planetarium projectors, for controlling blinking lights, and in fact there's a lovely display on Broadway that is exactly that. In the middle of Times Square you'll see something that's just a super theater marquee showing pictures and so forth on light bulbs. At any rate, it could have developed from any of these sources, but the fact that the team that developed it happened to be statisticians led to its being called a computer, which was a misnomer. The correct name is the all-purpose machine. That's what von Neumann called it. The name did not catch on. A computer is a box that follows a plan, and we want to have these for our personal use as typewriters, as filing cabinets, as viewing devices for the new world of information, as musical instruments, as communication devices.
We have all those things already.
Yes, but the computer may be thought of as an anti-gadget. Rather than being just another thing that makes life more complicated, it's the simplifying device that by integrating and tying in the others makes the separate fiddling and adjustment that the bad design has required on these different machines unnecessary. In other words, when this gets set up properly, your home computer will adjust your hi-fi and your lights and your wood stove and send out and pay the bills or help you pay the bills and so on.
Does anybody need that? You're too busy now.
I don't know where you're coming from, Max.
You're too busy
I certainly do.
Where I'm coming from is that I feel no need for such a device at all. Right. This seems to me, first and foremost, to be a technology looking for a problem to solve. Well, do you think that people do you feel the need to have such a device?
Personally?
Yes, personally.
Yes.
Do you?
I mean, my entire life is mainly tied up in writing. And being my own secretary and attempting to keep track of separate drafts and notes for unfinished writings. I want these all to be in a huge pool that I can zip through on the screen. So
don't you have file folders?
Yeah. So that one
Aren't
thing
they good enough?
No. One thing can only be in one file folder.
Isn't it remarkable that humanity survived without this all this time?
Yes, it is. And we're going to change. The point, look, but seriously, try to understand my point of view instead of just picking at it. The point is that I'm saying that ideas are not simple, and that categories are not simple. And when we categorize things and throw them in individual file folders, then we don't apprehend the true reality where one thing is in 7 different categories at once. What I want in the way of a manuscript handler is in a microcosm what the world needs, I think. And that's the idea that this piece of text that I've written should be under 7 different categories until I know what I want to do with it finally. And when you use file folders, you can only make the one copy and put it in the one folder, and you can't see a thing in all the different contexts that you want to see it in. So my private problem that I've tried to generate.
That's what your head is for. Who's going to make up the headings to feed into the computer, into the text handler or whatever it is that you've got? You're going to have to decide what categories it goes under anyway, aren't you?
Yeah.
Well, why can't you do that now?
I can, but they're not there. I can't riffle through category A and find the same paragraph with its marginal notes as when I riffle through category B as when I riffle through category C, unless I hire an army of secretaries. I'm not interested in hiring an army of secretaries. I just want to be there.
Library card catalogs do that same thing by putting things under various subject headings. You can do that at home.
Yes, and you know the extensive manual effort that's required. What I'm saying is that I think that.
Okay, this is a device to save you manual effort, in fact. It's not going to save any intellectual effort because you're going to have to think up the categories yourself to begin. Under either the manual or the electric system, you'd have to think up the categories.
It is possible to insist that every change is merely a small difference in degree if you do not want to see a change in kind.
Do you think this is a change in kind you're describing?
I certainly hope so. What I started to say was that this problem I've set myself can be thought of in another way as part of the library problem, as the problem of creating an electronic library that does not impose categories. The old library systems, the Library of Congress system, the Dewey Decimal System, imposed categories, which of course decayed as all categories do. And this fiction that every book is in one category required this elaboration of numbers and cross-indexing. But basically, the categories that the librarians worked out essentially helped whittle or rather place walls between the areas of thought. There should be no walls between areas of thought. There should be zones with multiple interconnectivities across them.
Tell me about IBM.
What would you like to know?
Well, I'd like to know what's wrong with them to start with, since that's what you want to talk about.
Okay, IBM is first and foremost a very slick sales organization, and it was created in the image of Thomas J. Watson, a supreme despot and very imaginative salesman who managed to create an organization with less local fat than any other corporation that ever happened, and one that has over the years learned to devote teams to getting things done. That's the positive side. And get these things done with dispatch and with earnestness. Now, whether they're done the way one would like to see them done, if one contemplated what the real nature of a problem, this is an entirely different matter. And critics of such things as IBM's 360 and 370 computers would say that they were Brobdingnagian, clumsy, and surrounded by unnecessary difficulties. And this, of course, is why many people, like the kids who showed me around the University of Waterloo this morning, far prefer to use systems like digital equipment machines, which are much more accessible to the sophisticated user. Anyway, the question then is why has IBM prevailed in its way? And the answer is they have a very interesting sort of monopoly, and one which obviously has a political side and a technical side. The problem is now that as they're swinging their new communication system into place, it seems increasingly likely that this communication system is more built to maintain the monopoly than it is built to satisfy the needs of what people ought to have. But this remains to be seen.
What communication system?
Oh, there's something called the satellite business systems, which IBM and Aetna Life Insurance, and I think a few other partners have created in a joint venture. And this is all right. See, what's swinging into place, Max, is we have great communication networks now coming about for the transmission of digital information. Now, by digital, we just mean in symbols. There's this mistake that digital means in numbers. That's wrong. The two commonest programming languages, digital programming languages in the world, are musical notation and knitting instructions. Okay. That's not. Why are you laughing? A symphony orchestra can be thought of as a large, wonderful machine whose parts, or rather, whose individual segments are artistic individuals, and the programming language for this machine is called musical notation or the orchestral score. And what the orchestra is doing when it turns the pages and follows these is looking at digital symbols in the program and enacting them. What
about knitting, though?
Yeah, all right. Knit one, purl two, and do it often enough according to this instruction, you get a sweater. I mean, that's a programming language.
Okay, that certainly isn't the second most common programming language in the whole world. You made that up.
Well, I don't know. Somebody said yesterday it was the first most common. In terms of the number of people who know it, perhaps it is. I don't know.
Oh, that's possible. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, millions of people can apparently read these patterns on long winter nights. But the point is that we're going that the telephone network is in place, and that's carrying analog information, that is wiggly signals, which are conventionally used for voice, and they're best adapted for voice. But now that we're sending more and more symbols along the wires, text and pictures, or certainly numerical information for the big corporations, but increasingly, I hope, text and pictures for little guys, for you and me and the kid next door, it's very important to have a network that's more adapted and cheaper for the sending of this stuff. In other words, if I want to talk to a computer...
What's IBM doing?
Well, they've got the satellite business systems, as I say, and I've recently read accusations that say that say it's essentially built to maintain the fortress character of their installations and prevent other systems from working through it conveniently. I have no reason to disbelieve this, but we'll see, as I say.
In other words, instead of using the telephone lines, they're using their own system now.
They have a satellite. And basically a corporation that wants to tie in with SBS, as I understand it, will have its own deep dish antenna outside or on the roof that talks up to this satellite, and so that a firm with offices in Toronto and in Montreal does not have to go through Bell Northern at all. It just goes zip up out into space and back. In the meantime, of course, personal users of computers are right now using the phone network extensively. So somebody will call a friend and say, "Hey, I've got a great new game for you. Stand by for data." And each of them puts his phone on his telephone on the computer's coupling device, and the machines go to each other. I can't really imitate it. They warble and receive the stuff in digital form, and you're paying telephone rates for what could be transmitted much more cheaply, so that Xerox and AT&T in the States are putting together networks now that will be much more suited to the personal use of computers, I believe, as well as to business uses. But I think that when people begin to realize that personal use of computers is going to be at least as important as business use in the future, and I think even more so, in absolute volume now, then these networks will have to start adjusting their services to meet the personal user.
You want to talk some more about IBM? What's going to happen to them? Are there enough with respect to IBM? Are there enough competing computer companies of considerable scale that make better equipment that IBM is going to start running for the hills?
Not that particularly. Let's rather than talk just about IBM, we'll talk about the computer center system, which has been to a large extent fostered and fomented by IBM. I think originally and unintentionally, but of late. It's really their cornerstone. Every big company, as a rule, has a computing center. This originally began when some enterprising person within the company said, "Gosh, I think we ought to have a computer," and persuaded management of this idea. And the company buys a big computer, and whoever it was that took the initiative in the first place is generally put in charge of it and suffers accordingly. But now an interesting turnabout occurs. Rather than being the upstart system within the organization, they become an entrenched power, a power center, and the computer center, in attempting to fulfill its functions, finds that its limited resources must somehow be allocated within the competing demands of the organization. So everybody in the company has to deal with this dratted computer center. Well, I'm glad you're amused.
All you've got to do is change the word computer to something else, and it's the same old problem. Okay,
yeah.
Go on.
Okay, and well, it's universal, but it's peculiar. I compare it to a medieval priesthood in that it's very like the church of medieval times, because they have the church controlled the access to God, and the computer center controls the access to the computer. Which is, in either case, it's the salvation you require. And in either case, you have to say the right sorts of prayers.
And it costs a lot.
And it costs a lot. You better believe it. Okay, so what is about to happen now, and what is happening throughout the world, I think, is that people within organizations who don't like to put up with the computer center are buying their own computers now. There was a law against it in most places. Most places have some sort of rule that you can't buy a computer without the approval of the Computer Selection Committee, which is controlled by the computer center, which may be controlled by the manufacturer. On the other hand, there are always loopholes, such as anything over $2,000 can't be bought without the computer center's approval, because they thought, snigger, that there'd never be a computer under that price. And now, by Jove, it is. You can get a nice Radio Shack computer for $1,000 US. I think that's $1,500 Canadian, someone told me. You can get...
but we're getting there.
And more and more people are bringing computers into their offices under their arms and thumbing their noses at the computer centers, and the computer centers don't like this at all, because it's going to show later on that they have feet of clay, and that they should not have been centralized in the first place. That every department should have had its own computer that it could have used in its own way, but that's not how it was, but it's how it's going to be. So that's this is going to be the guerrilla war in the coming years between computer centers and individuals. It doesn't have very much to do with the home computer revolution, but it's an interesting sidelight.
These computers that people are sneaking into their offices under their arms are...
Or buying with the departmental budgets.
Are adding machines. The one that you've got at home is a somewhat fancier thing that deals with books and Shakespeare and your files.
I think I haven't made it clear enough that they're identical, that the computer is a fundamental device.
Yes, you made that clear.
The
I want to know what the guy in the office is using it for.
Right, that depends on the programs, and the programs in one case may have to do with business retrieval, and in the other case are going to have to do with forms of play and exploration and reading. But the machine is identical.
A perplexed Max Allen talked to Ted Nelson, the president of Computopia, in 1979. It's not really so long ago, but it feels like forever, doesn't it? And that's it for our program that looked back at looking forward. I hope you enjoyed it. And please visit our website, which is at cbc.ca/rewind. You will find audio for this program and many of our others, pictures of the supposed robot Claytu, and links to our podcast. That's cbc.ca/rewind. Now, before we go, I'd like to read some of your letters. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys and the Stratemeyer Syndicate that made them and countless other children's book series happen. We got a lot of letters from you with a lot of fond memories. This one is from Alida Love. I am a 51-year-old woman with strong, fond memories of reading dozens of Nancy Drew books as a young girl. I have a cardboard box full of them, the yellow ones, in our basement, and I can't bring myself to give them away or get rid of them. I have 3 daughters of my own, ages 9, 11, and 15, and have not yet been able to convince them to read a Nancy Drew book. Not one. This is from Jessica Atkinson in Crow's Nest Pass, Alberta. I remember reading and loving my mom's Bobbsey Twins books. The musty old paper smell and words like chum and casement windows made them an enjoyable time capsule. I will be sure to introduce them to my 7-year-old soon. He is an avid reader, but like my mom did for me, there will likely be some words or phrases that I'll have to translate. And from Kirk Simlich in Smiths Falls, Ontario. Growing up during the 1970s north of Kingston with long, cold winters, I often snuggled up in bed reading the latest Hardy Boys novel. I felt like I was along for the adventure as a fourth member of the gang, along with Frank, Joe, and Chet. Who wouldn't be envious of Joe and his cool speedboat, his abilities to scale rock faces inside caves or fly an airplane? The suspense was enough to get your heart racing. The hardest part was always trying to stop when the author threw yet another hook at the end of the chapter. I often stayed up way past my bedtime, hurriedly shutting my light off, and pretended to be asleep when I heard my parents coming to bed. Lisa Skelton of Calgary writes, her hair wasn't blonde. If there's one word I associate with the Nancy Drew stories, it is Titian. The vocabulary used in the books was intelligent. You'd be hard-pressed to find someone's hair described as Titian in any of the series our kids read these days. From Fern Weens in Prince George, Nancy Drew was part of my childhood. When I had $1 saved from my allowance, I would venture to the local Kmart to buy a new Nancy Drew book. Fast forward to college. One evening, my friend and I pulled out an old Nancy Drew book. We laughed at the stereotypes, the dated references, and the absolute perfection of the main character. Fast forward another 20 years. I decided to record an old Nancy Drew book, complete with ad-libs, sarcastic comments, and impromptu advice for Nancy. My friend absolutely loved it. Now, each year, I record at least one book for her. Nancy Drew still provides hours of entertainment. And finally, from Will Smethurst in Edmonton. I have been reading the Hardy Boys mysteries to my children, boy 6, girl 9, for a few years now. They absolutely love the stories, but even they can spot that this is not great literature. Dad, how many concussions has Joe had so far in this book? Dad, why is Fenton Hardy always dubiously rubbing his chin? When we run out of Hardy Boy books to read, my kids insist that I make up a Hardy Boy story. Of course, the boys can never walk anywhere. They must hasten. And Fenton's never-ending well of resources allows me easily to tie up any plot problems. The cliffhanger chapters and the knowledge that the smugglers always get their comeuppance have made these stories a great read. Thanks for a great show. It's from Will Smethurst in Edmonton. We appreciate all your letters. You can write to us. Our email address is rewind@cbc.ca. Rewind is produced by Nancy Drew. No, by Marika Mayer. I'm Michael Enright. Thank you for listening.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.